Good morning, guys. It's Monday morning, and I'm really loving the fact that I have now gotten back on a schedule where I understand the difference between Mondays and Saturdays. I actually have been taking a lot of the weekend off. So, oh, Dhru, I'm getting that same echo.
Ah, crap. Okay, give me a second. I'm trying
All right.
to switch to the headphones.
So I'm gonna mute Dhru for just a minute. Let's see. There he goes. All right. So sorry, we're gonna start again. This is ASMM Digital Small Business Connection. It is a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. We're in episode 63, and we're streaming live today. We're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So the reason I tell you that is because it gives you a unique opportunity to ask questions. You have experts on the show, people who have their own business, who can have learned lessons over time, who are helping other people, and who can help you. So ask questions. Really take advantage of this opportunity to ask the questions. If you're listening to it on podcasts, you are not going to be able to ask questions because it's not live. I'm so sorry. I'm going to interrupt again. I've not had to do this. Luckily, we don't have a whole lot of people watching right now. Dhru, I'm still getting an echo. And everybody who's listening, we were not having this echo before, and we're suddenly, like right before we came on, we started having it. So I'm going to talk us through this while we're trying to figure it out. Thanks. All right. So I'll talk you through it. I want to know, since I started this and I said, hey, I know the difference now between a Monday and a Saturday. I want to know whether you know the difference between a Monday and a Saturday. What are you doing with your weekends these days? When COVID first hit, I was working all the time. There was no difference between Monday and Saturday. There was no difference between any day of the week, any hour of the week. I was working full time, all the time, nonstop. And it was draining. It was very, very draining. So now on the weekends, when the weekend comes, I'm not doing that. When the weekend comes, I am actually taking time off. That doesn't mean I don't work at all, but it does mean that I'm taking a lot of downtime. I go for walks, I go for hikes, I do actually a whole lot of physical stuff because what else can you do these days? But I am staying busy and I'm with other things other than my business. So I did do one thing this weekend. We got a new client, I sent out a contract, and that was the extent of it. I'm so sorry. I'm just kind of rambling because we're having a technical difficulty and I'm hoping we can get it fixed. Dhru, am I muted on your end? Let's see. You're muted. Let me unmute you. Okay, so Dhru has muted himself. We may have to start this for the podcast. We'll just start it all over again. So if you guys are watching live, thank you for being patient. And if you're listening, you're not going to hear any of this because we're going to edit it out. So, correct. All right. We're almost there. Thank you guys for being so patient. We don't usually have this. We talked for what? We usually talk for about 10 minutes before the show starts to work out any kinks. And this literally started just before we went live. So, and we thought we'd solved it. All right. I think we're good. Right. Are you there? That's great.
Can you hear me?
That's great. Yep. Okay. I can hear you. Awesome.
That's okay. Go old school.
Yeah. Well, thank you. All right. I'm going to start all over again. And for those of you who tuned in, I'm so sorry, but let me start it all over again. Hi, this is Ann Brennan. This is ASMM Digital Small Business Connections, and we're on episode 63. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. We are here to help you make the most of your business by bringing other entrepreneurs here who either have a specialty they can help you with or have learned a lesson the hard way through entrepreneurship. How many of you, I do, if you're listening to this right now, let me know, have you learned a lesson the hard way? And did it help your business in the long run? Because I find that it almost always does. I also want to remind you that we're streaming live, which means you can ask questions. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on YouTube. So you can ask questions. We'll see them here. And it's a great opportunity to take advantage of the people who come on the show who are taking the time to talk to you. So if you have a question, leave it in the comments. We'll see it. We can even pull it up on the screen. It's also a good opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I do this certain business. You can do a shameless plug for your business. We like that. Shameless plugs are good. So make sure you do that. I want to welcome our guest, Dhru. You have been so patient because we've had all these difficulties. Thank you for working behind the scenes on it. We have Dhru Beeharilal. Oh, I got it wrong. Beeharilal. Did I get it right?
You got it.
There you go. So, and Dhru, you're a leadership coach. Is that right?
Correct.
Tell us a little bit. And what?
Identity coach.
Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I typically work with clients, individuals, organizations, primarily small businesses. But the whole idea is I get people to get out of their own heads and figure out what they're facing when they talk with you with problems, and what kind of patterns that exist in their lives right now, and what kind of limiting beliefs are holding them back from what they want to achieve. A lot of times people know what they need to do to get where they want to go, but for some reason they're not really able to actually act on those things. And other times there's a lot of blind spots we don't see. And so it helps to have someone else to bounce ideas off of, bounce questions off of, and understand where those blind spots are, how to identify them, and how to work with them.
Absolutely. It's, I'll tell you, and this is like, everybody knows this about me. I will tell you everything about me. I have no secrets. So a couple of years ago, I spent some time identifying the limiting beliefs I have, right? What was holding me back in any way? And what I discovered is I had a limiting belief from really back in my childhood that I believed people did not like me. I believed almost that I wasn't likable, and it made it very difficult to do business. And so as soon as I realized, wait a second, because here's why I thought people didn't like me. People don't like me. This is what I told myself. People don't like me because I spill everything. Mm-hmm. And then I realized people like me for that very reason, because I tell everything. They know that when I'm talking to them, I'm telling them the truth because I don't hide things. So I love that you work with people on that, because we all have those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your example is a perfect example of one. Another example is someone who really wants to lose weight, for example, right? And that they know, everyone knows, right? You got to eat healthy and get some exercise, but we don't do that, right? Why? I mean, a lot of times people have beliefs that, like, if I eat healthy, I'm going to be like a health freak, or that I'm going to be that weird person or that frustrating person to deal with at the restaurant or whatever. And the reality is just all the stuff is in our heads.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about identity when it comes to entrepreneurship. Tell me,
sure.
When you meet with a client, what are you looking for? What does this area look like?
So entrepreneurial identity is pretty analogous to the actual individual identity, especially for small business owners when they're starting up. How close your identity is to your personal identity is to your entrepreneurial identity really depends on how close your business is to you, how much of your brand is actually you. So for example, in your situation, and like your brand is you're your brand. So your own identity is going to inform that work very, very closely. An author, a coach, those kind of things, those people, they inform identity directly. And on the flip side of things, when you're talking about like products or services, those kind of things that are more like plumbing, for example, it doesn't really matter in terms of that person's identity as much as their business identity. They're kind of separate, but how the business is run, what is informed by their identity at that point. So if you have the resolve and the patience to be an entrepreneur, that's how you can actually define yourself as an entrepreneur. And if you don't have those qualities and you want to develop them, then you can kind of work on those and build that identity for yourself. Then you can also create self-awareness though, and realize, is entrepreneurship really for me? Because it's not for everybody. Not everyone has the patience or can develop the patience, and not everyone has the resolve to really see the end in mind, because it's going to get difficult. And when it does, you're probably going to quit if you don't have the resolve for it.
Right. It's funny that you say this. I had this weekend, Saturday, was 4 years in business for us. And
Congrats.
I put something, thank you. Yeah, it's crazy because it doesn't feel like 4 years. And you don't know this, some people may, but I started the business as a way to have a stopgap. I needed to make a little bit of money while I was trying to create a resume. So I got a couple of clients and I thought, I'll fix my resume and then I'll go get a real job. And I still don't have a resume, but my business has been here for 4 years. But you're talking about the entrepreneurship thing. And I think I had one of the tips that people don't think about when they think about being an entrepreneur is surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs. Yep. And I think that's so important. So if you go back on my Facebook, you can read that I thanked a bunch of people, but I thanked 2 people in particular Both of them are entrepreneurs. Both of them are men who own actually service industry. So very different than what I do. One is a chimney cleaner or chimney sweep, and one is a landscaper. But they're both my go-to guys when I'm 6 o'clock at night, when I'm banging my head into my desk going, why am I doing this? Right? So I think knowing that about yourself, knowing, hey, you're going to need support. I think that's a big part of this.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge movie nerd and TV nerd, and so I'm like these references and quotes all the time. But Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, no one likes that movie. A lot of people don't like that movie, but I love that movie because there's one quote in there where this guy says one guy wrecks the car. He's like, "Why'd you let me drive your car, dude? You know I was gonna wreck it." He's like, "One car to know what a man's worth. I'll do that any day. I'll take that gamble any day." He's like, "Who you choose to be around you, let you know who you are." Right. Yeah. And that's huge.
Absolutely.
And those mastermind groups, these conversations that you keep having, the more you surround yourself with people of a like mind or who are in the mindset that you want to be in, whether that's a future state or a current state, the idea is to be growth minded. Right. And when you have that,
absolutely,
you surround yourself with people like that, you'll definitely achieve that for sure.
Absolutely. Well, and not everybody's going to get where you are. They're not going to understand. You just said the thing about losing weight, and you don't want to be that person who's kind of the freak of the friend thing because you're all now I'm a health nut, right? Well, when you're an entrepreneur, people don't get it. Even my husband, who is hugely supportive of me, even he doesn't always understand where I am. So having that group, whether it's a mastermind group, whether it's your BNI, I think you're in BNI as well, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. So whether it's BNI, whatever it is, if you have people behind you, it's going to make life a lot easier.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're not islands, right? We're social creatures. So when people we're around with whatever habits they have, we end up picking up those habits ourselves because we're around them so much.
Right.
So if they have good habits, you're going to get really good habits.
Right. Exactly. All right. So let's go back to identity. Does a business have an identity, and how do you figure that out?
Absolutely. And so people take a lot of time and spend a lot of money on marketing and branding. Branding is part of that identity. The logo is also part of that identity. But when you take the whole organization as a whole, in terms of its services, the marketing, the branding, this mission statement, the values that made you start that organization, that's really what the identity is. And the identity is also informed by the people in charge of it. So you have organizations that have a great mission, but then have really crappy leadership. That's not going to have a very strong identity. It's going to be in conflict. Right. And so you want to make sure that the leadership identity and the identity of the organization in terms of mission statement, in terms of the goals and where it started and where it wants to go, they have to be in alignment. That you've seen the situation happen with a lot of different agencies in the government, particularly. Right. We have a lot of things where people tend to take over leadership positions and then they don't actually have the same alignment with the goals of the organization in the government or otherwise. When you have bad leadership, that can set the precedent for the entire organization to start falling apart, because the people who are working their butts off and actually care about the mission are going to start feeling less and less valued and start feeling less and less motivated to continue the work, because they'll be like, we're spinning our wheels. What are we doing here? So it's really a matter of aligning those two identities. At least two is in the situation with this one owner. If there's a leadership team, that's even more complicated. And that's why it really helps to get some people who know what they're doing in terms of aligning those kind of things. Consultants charge a lot of money for that purpose, exactly, because they know how to align the identity of entire leadership team with the identity of the organization and make sure those two are in alignment so that the organization can continue to grow and thrive. If they're in conflict, you're not going to have a lot of growth.
Yeah, it's okay. I have been listening to Walt Disney for the Walt Disney book biography. By the way, I think it's like 34 hours. So it took weeks for me to get through this book, but it was incredible. It was a really, really great book. So now I'm done and I have started a new book, and I'm listening to the Everything book by, I'm forgetting the author, but I'm listening to the Everything book. It's about Amazon, the Everything store. Sorry. And in the Everything story, one of the things they talk about is what makes them different, and early on finding that difference. Right. And somebody said to Jeff Bezos, they said, you're doing this wrong because you're trying to sell books and you're putting these reviews out there, and these reviews are bad reviews. And so what are you doing? And he says, no, I'm doing it right because the customer's first. I want to help the customer make a good choice. And that's huge. The fact that he saw that very early on while he was still just selling books. that changed everything. So I think that is a huge part of our identity. We're here to help customers. We're not here to sell books. We're here to help customers find the book that's going to work for them. So that's part of the alignment, right?
Absolutely. I mean, he knew what his end game was. I mean, look at a lot of these the great business owners that are highlighted a lot of times, like Walt Disney, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. These guys are all successful for a reason. They didn't. First of all, one more important thing, going back to what we talked about just now in terms of who you surround yourself with, they were able to say no and set boundaries to be based on what they knew was the end game that they were getting to. Steve Jobs wanted to create an amazing user experience, right? He wanted the users to be first. He didn't cut corners. He refused to cut corners, sometimes to the point where people were like, "You're crazy," right? Same thing with Jeff Bezos, right? Bill Gates. These guys, Walt Disney, for example, another one. He opened a theme park, and he was like, "This is not a theme park for kids. It was for adults to feel like kids." That was his end game at the end of the day. And he didn't care what anyone said. He didn't care if kids liked it. He cared if adults liked it, and that was his whole idea. And which is funny because you look at the Disney image now and kind of how it's morphed over the years. It's kind of changed from that, shifted a little bit, right? But that's an intentional shift as opposed to a just kind of throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what sticks approach. Google again as well. Like you look at their page, now it's a little bit more complicated, but it's still very, very simple. The search bar is the biggest thing on the page for a reason. And you compare Google and Yahoo. I make this convention all the time. And Yahoo from 10 years ago, you throw everything in the kitchen sink at the user. Everything's on the screen. You have all these like news, you have weather, you have everything. It's confusing as heck. The search bar is somewhere lost in there, right? Google's saying we do one thing really, really well. This is what we want to do. We want to do search, and that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And so you keep those things in mind. That's all, again, part of the identity of the organization. And when you have that strong identity and you're in alignment, that's when it succeeds.
Absolutely. So we have a comment from James Spinato. He says there's something called the Peter Principle. It means that everyone can rise to the level of incompetence. Is there a way to figure out where the level is for me, or am I to go on my own instinct? That's a great question.
It's a really great question. The Peter Principle is, I mean, if you work in corporate America, you will see the Peter Principle in effect, especially in the government too nowadays. But you have the Peter Principle is a really good. Knowing it exists is the first step, obviously. But for yourself, doing self-awareness work in terms of like meditation is really good because it's very introspection based. You want to be introspective. That's the bottom line. You want to ask yourself tough questions and then be able to give yourself the tough answers. That's what a coach is going to do with you. They're going to ask you the tough questions and really help you and understand to build self-awareness around yourself. The key for if you're doing your work on your own is to literally ask yourself those questions. Ask yourself about developmental questions you want to ask for yourself. Am I confident in the job I'm doing right now? If I'm not confident in what I'm doing right now, or I'm getting promoted to this job, what do I need? What skills do I need to build on right now that I have, and what skills do I not have? And where am I at in competency wise where I'm at? I will say that there's if you really do the work, if you invest in yourself and you take the time and invest the energy and really be honest with yourself, which is the key. It doesn't matter what skill set you're at. You're going to get better. You're going to be able to advance and grow. And there's not going to be the highest level of incompetence for you as long as you invest in yourself. The reason the Peter Principle exists is because people get lazy, people get complacent, they don't care as much anymore because they know they're just going to get promoted after a couple of years automatically. And so there's like people only have to work hard enough to not get fired. Anyone who watches Office Space knows that line, and it's true.
Right. Well, I think too often we forget that we have to do that. I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking about the mask situation, right? Some people are not wearing masks, and people will say, "Oh, well, they're just being rude. They're just being hateful. They're whatever it is that they're doing." But if you think about it, there's probably something else. And I was thinking about that this weekend. I'll tell you honestly, because I went to mass yesterday, and it's the longest I've had to have my mask on for any given time. Usually, I go to the grocery store, I'm out of there pretty quickly. If I'm out, I'm not out long enough to have to wear it for a very long period of time. An hour at mass was a long time, and it was warm in there. And as I was sitting there, I was finding, oh my God, I'm having huge anxiety in church of all things, because, usually at church you're calm and you're feeling good. And no, I was having anxiety. But the nice thing about it was I'm pretty self-aware. I spent a lot of time paying attention to my own what's happening. And I started thinking about it, and I started thinking, okay, well, this is how I'm going to calm myself down. But too many people say, I don't want to wear the mask because it's an invasion of my privacy. It's an invasion of my, the government's telling me what to do, whatever it is. And if they really think about it, it probably has more to do with the fact that it's making them anxious. It's making them uncomfortable. Why is that? What is it that's causing that? And, again, I told you I'm very honest. Mine came because I'm wearing it. And as I'm wearing it and it's hot in church, and I'm a 51-year-old woman, I started having a hot flash. And that was really what was causing the anxiety. When it came down to it, I'm having a hot flash in church with the mask on. I can't do anything about it. But I knew that. So knowing these things about yourself, being able to identify them, being able to take care of how you're feeling and what you are is a huge, huge part of being a business owner. I mean, I know the mask thing is separate, but it is. It's a huge part of being a business owner.
Absolutely. But what you displayed is self-awareness, right? And that's what a lot of people lack. Because self-awareness requires asking difficult questions. People don't want to ask. They'd rather lie to themselves, right? They'd rather say, like, for example, what you said, it's an invasion of my privacy. Okay, that's an excuse, right? There's excuses and there's reasons. That's definitely an excuse. There's something else underneath that, right? And probably something else underneath, a couple of it underneath that tells you actually what the actual issue is. But those folks are not willing to first be honest like you are and be an open book.
Right.
Second, they're probably not going to do that introspection work to actually ask themselves what's really wrong, what's really the issue here. And then on top of that, they don't want to actually answer that question. Even if they do ask that question and they get the answer, they might not get an answer that they like. It might be an answer that involves them feeling like, oh, well, I'm not where I want to be yet. And they're not ready to deal with that answer.
Right.
One of the problems I think with the way we've kind of moved in the direction of things right now is exactly that, where it's, yes, you are okay who you are and you can still get better. It doesn't mean just saying that there's more work to be done or more work you can do for yourself doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It just means that we can all of us, every one of us, there's no one on the planet who's perfect, right? And there's no one who can't do some work on themselves. So we could all stand to do more work on ourselves.
Well, and this is kind of taking it out in left field, but you did bring up meditation. And so I want to talk about that because a lot of people don't understand why, as a business owner, it's recommended to you so often. Can you talk a little bit about why we recommend it so often?
Absolutely. I do meditation and mindfulness practices with all of my clients because of the fact that typically they're in higher stress environments and they have a lot of weight on their shoulders, whether actually or not. But meditation is one of those things where it's almost the beginning of self-awareness, because after a while, once you start quieting, not silencing, but quieting your mind to the point where you kind of cut out the noise, you can hear yourself. And that's really what meditation is. It's getting in touch with who you are. And again, it comes right back to identity. And that's why this model is so powerful, because it really comes back to who you are and listening to yourself and being able to open that dialogue with yourself that you don't otherwise have. We always have things buzzing, things ringing, things in traffic, whatever it is. We have music on. We have all these kind of things that are going on. And again, none of these things are wrong. They're reality. But taking the time to step away from those things and intentionally set aside time for you to talk with you, to get to know who you are, because that's a dialogue that never happens, right? We hear ourselves. Our self-talk is so bad, right? It's so negative. It's like, oh, you'd rather say, oh, you suck. Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. You're such an idiot. Oh my God. Versus you never actually take time to say, hey, great job on that. Like it's always negative.
Right.
It's never praising.
Exactly.
And so if you're just constantly giving yourself a negative loop of feedback, you're going to get negative results.
All right, I'm going to take us off on another loop because you just said something that I think is so important. I think it's something where I want to move us into individual identity. But before I do that, you just said we never praise ourselves. So what do you recommend to people for praising themselves? What do you recommend for people for listing their wins or today or today? Or how do you do that?
So I encourage folks as often as possible to journal, or to, at the very least, to have a conversation with yourself, like the meditation practice, or what I call centering, what the coaching community calls centering. It's like a meditation light. But the idea is to kind of take some time for yourself to even just recognize something you're grateful for the day. Gratitude is a really underrated thing. And the more you engage in it, the happier you're just going to become automatically, because you're just going to shift your focus. We're used to noticing negative things, right? And when you look at all the things that's wrong in the world, there's a lot of things that are wrong in the world, absolutely. But there's also a lot of things that are good right now, right? And we're so used to focusing on the negative. We're so used to bringing up the negative that we're going to start noticing the negative. We'll just keep noticing the negative over and over and over again. And then suddenly our lives are negative and our energy is negative. And we want to change that energy and switch it to be more positive. And even just start with neutral. How about just balance it out, right? Like for every negative thing you say something positive. Like, I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful for the fact that I have electricity right now. I'm grateful for the fact that, you know, I can still connect with my friends using my cell phone or using Zoom or having a podcast like this or listening to podcasts. That's another thing, right? We have all these things available that we don't praise because we take them for granted. And the more you take things for granted, the less you'll appreciate things. So absolutely, it's important to take those things and take time to actually recognize the benefits we have in our lives, especially as business owners. Going back to the business owner thing, right? We have a lot of advantages, you know, that are afforded to us that we have to recognize. And we each have our own skill sets. We each have things that we do really, really well. And we want to be able to recognize those things so we can actually build on that. If you don't take time to recognize that, then you're not going to be able to leverage those skills as much as you could otherwise.
Right. So I do two things, and I don't know if you do it. There's probably something like this. I use the full focus planner. Okay. And I list my wins every day. What are my wins? Yep. What did I do well yesterday? And sometimes I have to dig really deep to figure that out. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just there. So that's one thing. And then the other thing we do in our office is we have at our weekly meetings, we each list our wins for the week. And we say, you know, what was our business win, but also what was our personal win? And because for me, I don't want it's all women in my office. I don't want the women in my office to spend their week not figuring out how great they are, right? If I can keep them boosted and I can keep them knowing that they're really great and that their life is good, then I think it can help my business, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the more positive, the more they can recognize their own ability to do amazing work, the more work they want to do, because they're going to want to feel amazing. They're like, oh my God, I did that. That's awesome. I really did that. Right. You know? Exactly. And we don't recognize our own accomplishments. We minimize them, right? Because we're afraid of sounding arrogant or whatever. But we're quick to put ourselves down 100%, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I brought in, and Whitney will hear this because she does afterwards. She'll be the one that edits and she'll be the one that puts it up. We brought in Whitney, I guess, in the end of May, beginning of June, during the pandemic, and she came in to do social media. And I said to her, I'm so sorry, because I know that's what you came in for, but I started this podcast and I can't run it all by myself. So I need help. I need it to go up as a podcast. I need it to go up on my website. I need it to go up in all these different places. And I don't have time to figure out how to do it. I don't have time to to actually spend the time each day doing it. And so I need you to do it. And she did it. And she, for the longest time, she's like, well, I'm slowly learning. And finally she's like, I got it. And that was her win, right? It was awesome. Yeah. She's a 52-year-old woman. We're very close in age. And she's like, look at me at 52 years old, learning how to do podcasts for people. And that's just really a cool thing when you can do that yourself, when you can figure out, hey, this is a win for me. This is something big. So
absolutely.
That leads us into this individual identity and why it's important to your business to understand who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you take the Whitney's example, right? Like she knew she had a developmental place where she wanted to grow herself, and she could have very easily said, "Oh, I'm too old," or I'm just not. This is not about the technology business. Oh, podcasting, that's for the young kids. That's for these damn millennials. Whatever they want to, whatever argument, excuse you can give, right? You can give a million excuses, but the other thing you can do is take it and own it and just kick ass at it, right? Which is what she's doing right now, because you're kicking ass right now anyway, right?
Right. So, yeah.
There's different ways to approach everything, and that's all comes out to who you are, and who you want to be. I'll give another movie reference because I do this all the time. So, the movie The Replacements. It's not a very popular movie. But it was entertaining.
I love that movie.
So good, right? Amazing. Keanu Reeves. I love Keanu Reeves, and Gene Hackman's awesome too. But in that movie, Gene Hackman plays the coach of the team, and Keanu Reeves is the quarterback. And Keanu is practicing one day, and Gene Hackman looks at him and says, when I look at you, I see two men. I see the man you are and the man you ought to be. One day those two are meet, and it should make for a hell of a football player, right? Now take that out of that. It's really about who he is right now versus who he wants to be. And that's kind of a really elegant way to talk about what self-development and what coaching really, really focuses on. It focuses on who you are right now and who you want to be and who you could be, maximizing your potential, right? And your individual identity it's very simple in terms of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. If you have a growth mindset, you're going to be always looking for ways to advance and ways to grow and ways to build yourself, right? And then there's also going to be the fixed mindset where you're like, okay, well, I am where I am. This is who I am. I'm just going to, own it. They use the term own it in terms of just limiting themselves. That's not owning it. right? You can owning it's fine. That's one part of it, but then you can still grow on that. Like you taking the step to say, I need help with this is a big deal, right?
Right.
And people are willing to put themselves down, but they're not willing to ask for help. What's that about?
And that's the hardest thing, isn't it? It's the hardest thing for business owners to do, is to let go of some of the things that they're not good at. We just had Kat on Friday. We had Kat Harvey talking about copywriting. So many people think, well, it's my business, I should be able to write about it. And so many of them really shouldn't be writing. They really should pass it to somebody who knows how to do it, right? 100%. So yes, so that's a huge part of understanding it. Another thing for me in individual identity is helping people. I think people need to understand what their values are. What is really, truly important to you? And when you ask people that, it's a hard question. Mm-hmm. That's a hard question.
100%.
So how do you help people with that?
It's tough a lot of times, but I said that your relationship with your coach, if you have a coach, is going to be the most intimate relationship you're going to have with almost anybody, possibly even your partner, because you get into areas you probably otherwise would never want to go, and part of that is values, because sometimes your values don't align with your goals. Your values don't align with what your business goals might be, and that either means you're in the wrong business, or it means that your values are not really totally defined yet. Because if you still value the business and you really have the values of the business in mind, and you have other values over here that conflict, and you got to decide which one matters more, right? But asking important questions like, why does that matter to you? What's the impact of that in your life? What's the impact on this? What patterns are you seeing as you go through life to see these different things? Those are the questions that you start with, and you kind of go deeper depending on the answer. But again, a lot of these questions involve really, really being honest with yourself. And even if you want to do the work on your own, that's fine. But you got to be willing to answer those questions honestly, because sometimes the answer may be, yeah, I should probably sell this business, or I should probably not be in business. So this is not something I'm doing because I want to do this. I'm doing it because I want money or something, right? But then the question becomes, what do you want money to do? Money by itself is not an end. It's a means to an end. What do you want to be able to do with money that you can't do right now? That's the question you got to ask. Because I work with one client. He's like, I want to have $1 million in the bank. And I'm like, okay, why? He's like, what do you mean why? I'm like, what do you want? What's $1 million in the bank and enable you to do that you can't do right now? He's like, oh, I never thought about that. I'm like, well, think about it. What do you want to do?
Right.
And, he turns out he heard someone else in the office when they're going around talking about goal setting, and he heard someone else in the office say that they wanted $1 million in the bank. He's like, oh, that sounds like a cool goal. I'll take that one too. Yeah, I want $1 million in the bank too. But what that person's going to do with $1 million is their business, and what you want to do with $1 million is yours. It's not necessarily the same thing. If you have an idea in mind of what you want to do, then sure, that's great. But clarifying what you want to be able to do with your goals, why your goals are important to you, what achieving that goal will mean to you, that's where that comes back into identity, and that's all part of it. It's a really, really, it's a comprehensive model for who you are and where you want to go and why you want to go there, because that gets to your values.
Right. Well, I'll go back to me. And when I first started this business, the idea was I wanted to make some money for our family. That was it. I wanted to make some money for our family. And then my goals have changed over time. So what do I really want? And again, we'll talk about age. I'm getting older. My husband's getting a little older, and we're not old, but we're getting older. We're looking at the future, and you're thinking, okay, so what do I really want? Well, when it came down to it, when I did the work, what it came down to was I've had friends lose their husbands. I want to make enough money that if something were to happen to my husband, I wouldn't immediately go, oh my God, what do I do now? What do I do with my family? What does my family do? I wanted to make enough money that I could step into that role and I could take care of our family. So knowing that changed everything. It changed it so much that then I'm like, okay, so this is the amount I need to make. And almost immediately, I set that goal, and almost immediately I met that goal. And I thought, okay, so now what do I want? What is that next thing? Well, I'd like to have it so secure that if something happened to me after something happened to my husband and I wasn't able to work, that I'm okay because I've got this set up, right? So those things, that takes a lot of digging, and takes a lot of, to admit that, oh my gosh, something might happen to my husband, and oh my gosh, something might happen to me. That's not an easy thing to admit, but going through it, figuring out who you are, what you feel, and what those goals are, it's a huge part of being an entrepreneur.
Oh yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So just to put you on the line here, what are your core values? What's the most important thing to you?
My most important thing is honor of anything else, and that's not a common one apparently I hear, but I've taken a
Yeah,
lot of time to think about that, and I think because honor underlies a lot of different things, and it underlies authenticity, and underlines what the value is that I bring to my clients, and giving my word and that kind of thing. And so it's really important that I'm honorable to myself and to my clients and everyone I care about. And so
right,
I don't want to ever be in a position where I'm not living to that value. If anything else, everything else falls away, that's my value that I fall back to.
right.
That's my most important value.
And I like that you said honor encompasses authenticity. Authenticity is mine. Authenticity is
Nice.
really important to me, and
Yep.
clearly I put it all out there. But and then in addition to authenticity is gratitude. So those two
Yes.
things for me, without them, I couldn't do it. But I also have put them into my business.
Hmm.
So that kind of leads us to that next part, which is what happens when your identity is out of alignment, what you're actually doing and your identity is out of alignment.
Well,
So because
things get a little crazy.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
just think about it. I mean, I've told my team these are my core values. I started a business, and our core values. Then I feel like our core values really are my core values, which is
Hmm.
authenticity and gratitude. So gratitude specifically runs through the business because if you're not grateful to the client who's sitting there talking to you, even if they're sitting there and they're giving you a hard time and you're aggravated with them, if you're still not grateful for them, something's going to be missing in our business. That's what we offer people is gratitude.
Yeah, and that's powerful. I mean, honestly, like I said, gratitude is a really powerful one. And if your identity is out of alignment, you're not going to be able to see gratitude. Honestly, that's one of the
Right.
side effects, right? You're going to be focused
Right.
on little things that actually don't that are setting you off for no reason. You might get really irritable. You might start to feel like something's not right. You don't know what it is, but something's not right. You might start to feel kind of stuck, frustrated, impatient. There's so many different things that emotions you feel that you go through. It's almost like you're going through stages of grief, right?
Right.
Because it's like you're going through all these different stages and it's a cycle because you're not taking time to define what's actually wrong. And you start dealing with little symptoms here and there. Like, okay, I'm sleepy. I can't sleep though, but I'm really tired all the time, but I can't sleep. So let me just take a sleeping pill and go to sleep. Or let me take like a Lunesta or whatever, or something like that to help me sleep better. Or you're like, I'm really tired in the morning. I'm just gonna drink a crap ton of coffee, right? Then you got to go pee all
Right.
the time. It's not fun. Yeah. So, but
Exactly.
the other thing that a lot of people don't think about is what do you call it? Midlife crises. Sorry, midlife crises are a function of identity being in misalignment. I mean, if you look at the way that those things happen, people end up getting in careers when they're in their early 20s, if not before, and they stay in those careers forever. And those
Right.
careers don't actually align with their values or anything like that, and they stay with them forever. And then before they know it, they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're like, well, crap, I've been in this thing for 40, 50 years, and I haven't actually taken time for me. Because you get the next promotion, you're like, oh, I'm getting comfortable, I'm good, whatever, and it's fine. You start a family, you start getting more and more obligations, and you can't take the time to define yourself, to understand who you are, what you want to accomplish in your life, and those kind of things. And I've heard a lot of people make the argument that, oh, nowadays we're focused too much on taking time for yourself and whatever, and like back 50 years, 60 years ago, they didn't have this issue of like identity and like self-awareness or whatever. And things were different, frankly. I mean, time was very different back then. There's a lot more things that people had to struggle for back then that they don't have to struggle for right now. I mean, if you look at
Right.
the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the further back you go in time and human development, human age, we're further down on the pyramid, right? Right now, we're at the
Right.
point where we're high enough on the pyramid, we can start looking at self-actualization, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't
Right.
make us the snowflake generation, right? It just means that we're higher up on the pyramid. So we're allowed to look at that. We can enable ourselves to look at those kind of things. And if you're lower on the
Well, I
pyramid, then
think,
you're not able to do that. Sorry.
Drew, when you think about it, and you said midlife crisis, that's a perfect way to think about it. When we were, well, you're young, a lot younger than I am, but when I was growing up, there was a lot of divorce, a whole
Hmm.
lot of divorce. And I don't know how much better the rate is now, but I feel like I know fewer and fewer people who are getting divorced. And I think part of that is understanding your core values. If your core values honor that, for you, if they honor your relationship, if they honor the person who you're with, that's important to you, then you're more likely to stay in it. If you don't have these things, you can't do that. If you don't understand who you are, it's easier to go, I can walk away from this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that people don't realize, that if they understand themselves better, they're less likely to, quit a job that they should stay in, or less likely to stay in a job that they shouldn't stay in. If they actually really pay attention to where they are, they're less likely to leave a marriage and a family if they understand that, okay, this is not in alignment. Here I am having this affair with this young person because, it makes me feel good, but does it really make me feel good? Right? I think those are these things that we're not talking about. And again, these aren't easy conversations to have with ourselves.
No.
So, yeah.
No, they're not. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure what the actual rate of divorce is, but I mean, I at least in certain communities, it's gotten actually higher, because on the flip side, on one side, self-awareness, it does allow you to say, okay, I did get with this person for a reason, and I do want to be with them. They actually who I care about, and I'm not going to, step out on them. On the flip side, you have situations where people are more confused about what's happened, because they're not actually understanding their own identity. Everything's always go, 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 right? We don't take time to step back and figure out who we are. So we get with the wrong person, and then we end up splitting up. But in the past, at least in South Asian communities, a lot of times you have these situations where people get together and they just stay together because the community is going to judge them. And so it takes a lot more self-awareness. It takes a lot more self-confidence to take a step back and say, look, this is not right for me, and I need to take a step back. I need to do my own thing. And this is, that's how it works. And that takes a lot more than people realize. They're facing a lot of judgment. They're facing a lot of ostracization from different friend groups or family or whatever. And so it's a double-edged sword. But on the one side, you have the people who are able to redefine themselves and do the work and actually stay in the marriage that they know makes them happy, right? And these other things that are influencing from the outside can be blocked out, right? But on the flip side, when you have the marriage that's not working, the influences are actually the ones that are trying to make you stay in that marriage. You can actually still block those out and then take a step back and do that. So it depends on the person and outside influences.
Absolutely, because I think that is definitely the case. I go back to being a senior in college, and I had a friend who said, I don't know whether I should get married. He wants to get married. I don't know if we should get married. And I was like, well, if you're doubting that, maybe you shouldn't get married. And she says to me, we can always get divorced. And I know, you were going into this the wrong way. But I think that is the thing. That is the thing to think about. Are you in a bad relationship? Are you in a good relationship? If you're in a good relationship and you're doing something that's really outside of your core values, then think about what you're doing first. Because I think that's so many of us are not living in that alignment with what really matters to us, right?
Yeah, and we lie to ourselves.
And I think
we're really good at
and
lying
we lie to ourselves. Exactly. Well, I talk about this a lot, and divorce is hard. I've watched people go through it. It is hard, but it's something that a lot of people accept, right? A lot of people accept that. Yeah, gosh, you got to get out of that. That's not right. I had a similar thing, but it was very, very hard, and I still get the same excuse every single time I mention it. I had to walk away from my mother. That's hard. People are like, "Oh, but she's your mom," and I had to look at myself and figure out where I was. And it was a very hard thing to do. But the way I ultimately did it was just to think, okay, if this were my husband who were treating me the same way, what would my friends and family say? And they would all say, you've got to get out of that relationship. That's a horrible relationship. That's dangerous to you. Get out. So it is not, self-awareness and understanding where you are and understanding your identity and how you see yourself in general, and how you want other people to see you. That's probably the most important thing you can work on, especially as an entrepreneur, but as a person in general, but especially as an entrepreneur, because this is a hard life. It is a hard life being an entrepreneur. So
100%. And if you're the whole thing about identity is it's how you interact with yourself and how you interact with the world, and also how you allow the world to interact with you. So you teach people how to treat you, what you're willing to accept, what you're willing to deal with. And if the longer you tolerate that kind of thing, even as an entrepreneur, it's the same thing with your customers or your clients, right? If you build a relationship with your clients where they're influencing everything you do all the time, and it's only them, it's never your vision, you're never going to catch up with the market. You're always going to be one step behind because you're always responding and not being proactive. right? The reason the iPhone is as successful as it was is because not because it responded to market trends. No one was out there saying, I want a smartphone. No one knew what a smartphone was, right? But the idea was we need to revolutionize it. I want to, just because we want to be the first smart, we want to do this thing that's amazing. People are going to love it. And turns out, guess what? They did. But if they never took that step to say, we want a touch screen, we want to be able to text easier, we want to be able to use all these different apps on a phone. Apps on a phone? What was that? That was the thing we did before, right? We had like that weird scroll menu thing, you know, we had like the snake game. That's all we had, right? And kids are like, what's the snake game? What are you talking about? Like, you know, that's what we had.
Exactly. Right.
So if you never take time to define yourself and really focus on your business and how you want your business to go, and obviously take your customers into account, you have to, but you got to balance those things.
Well, that's a good point, though. Let's go back to that. Taking your customers into account. You do, but last week I had to let a customer go. It was a very, very hard thing to do because this was a customer who had brought me other clients. And I spent probably 2 weeks trying to decide what to do. And what it came down to was the fact we were far outside the scope. They were costing me money, and it was not good for my business. That's a hard thing when you look at it and you're like, but that's a check that's coming in, right? I really want that check. Well, is that check really what it is? So you've got to, when you're an entrepreneur, that self-reflection is not just you, it's self-reflection for your business as well. Is this client good for your business?
Yeah. I mean, the question, is this serving me? How is this serving me? Right. Is a huge question. It's you just said it, like, it's not an easy question to answer. Because sometimes the answer is no, it's not serving me, and I need to let this go. I need to drop this, whatever that looks like, whether it's your mother or, you know, your girlfriend or boyfriend, or whether it's a client. And, you know, as an entrepreneur, the way you think about money is very, very different than the way an average person thinks about money. That's another thing that kind of differentiates us. The way entrepreneurs think about money is, or the ways I encourage them to think about it is, you can always make another dollar. You cannot make any more time. Right. So if you're spending hours and hours on this client that's not really giving you any return, and they're not doing the work they need to be doing, they're causing you grief, whether that's time and energy and frustration. Forget the money side for a second, right? If they're causing you all this extra stuff that you're dealing with outside of work hours, or you're dealing with extra stuff that you're investing extra in this one client, it's the 80-20 rule. You're investing 80% of your time and energy into a client that's giving you 20% of return. That's cut that out, right? Focus on the 20% that gives you what you want.
Absolutely. And it's funny because there's a book that I would generally tell you I hate. I did tell people I hate. It's The Pumpkin Plan. I was like, oh, it's just annoying. I hate everything about it. But I'd go back to it all the time. And that was definitely a consideration when I was looking at what to do with this client. It was not an easy decision. I really like the client. She's a nice person. It just wasn't working for us. It wasn't going to work for us.
Well, that's important too. The distinction as an entrepreneur you have to make between personal and professional, right? You can love that person. They can be a really nice person, really, really good person outside of working with them, but they can be a really crappy client, right? And you got to make the distinction. If they're a bad client, you got to let them. I mean, it's the same thing when you're managing someone who you're friends with, right? If you're on the same team with someone and you're their manager and they're your friend, that's a tough balance to walk. But you got to distinguish the friendship from the professional relationship. Same situation.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. I want to go and tell people how they can find you. This is your website.
Yes. So that's my website, nayanleadership.com. I'm also on Twitter, Dhru B, DHRUBE. Also on Facebook, same thing. LinkedIn, same thing. Instagram did not let me get Dhru B, so I got Dhru B, which is my full name. But then I'm also on YouTube. With if you search Nayan Leadership on YouTube, you can find me there. I have a couple of videos here and there, which is trying to do those a couple times a week. But you know, motivation always, time and that kind of thing. Recording and editing, it's fun.
Oh yeah, that is fun. You know what? Somebody asked me the other day. They said, "Oh, so we just went live. When will this go up as a podcast?" And I said immediately, and they're like, "Well, how?" Because we generally don't edit it. It's I want to get it out there. It's important to me to get it out there. It's important because I want my entrepreneurs to hear it, but it's also important to me because I bring people on. I bring people like you on with the idea. As a matter of fact, Kat called me immediately after her show the other day, and she texted me and she's like, "I got a new client." And I was like,
that's awesome.
And that's why we do this, because we want you to be able to talk about what you do, talk about stuff that makes people go, I want to call him. I want to be involved with him. So we get it out there. And sometimes that means it's not the cleanest thing. We might have to clean this one up because, at the beginning we had some pretty major issues, but,
yeah.
but I think it'll be okay. We'll work it out. So let's talk about who we've got coming up next. We actually have 2 different people coming up this week, and one is on a Tuesday. We never, ever do Tuesdays, but this is how much I love Sal Schittino. Sal has spoken at the last 2 Burgers and Bands. He will probably speak at the next 10 Burgers and Bands events because he is so amazing, and he works with young people. He also works with business owners. He works with young people on trauma, people who have gone through terrible traumas. He's a counselor. He does that. But he also works with business owners who have a block about what they're doing. He is a therapist who works with both, and I just adore him. So he's next. And then we have Stephen Crisp coming up. Stephen is a voice coach who is going to talk about inclusivity and specifically what he does with teaching people to sing, but how he has brought in the LGBT community into his voice lessons and into his business. And so I think that's going to be an interesting talk as well. And he's local here. Actually, I think he's in a BNI as well over in this Bethesda area. So these are not all BNI people, but it's funny that they get 3 in a week because Sal is also in a BNI out in Millersville, Maryland. So 3 in a week. All right. I want to remind everybody to please subscribe. If you're listening to this on iTunes or you're listening to it anywhere you're listening to it, please subscribe there. If you're watching this, please go over to YouTube and subscribe there because, again, until I get 1,000, my kids are just going to keep thinking that I'm a loser. So go over, subscribe on YouTube, make me happy. It's super easy to do that. It's youtube.com/Brennan Annie, so you can do that. This was really great, Dhru. I cannot remember how we met, but I'm really glad that we did because I think you have a lot to offer.
Thanks so much, Anne. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, thank you. All right, guys, we will see you Tuesday. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.